go ahead and start the recording so that we have this for everybody. So what I'm going to do is I am going to walk through the study guide and basically just kind of point out what you need to focus on outside of the charts for diseases. So I'm not going to go over this whole thing, all these diseases. And this is the one that's available to you as an attachment in your test, which I added the video that shows how to reach the material in your Exemplify in this video that I posted. It's in a reply to the final exam preparation material. If you're in my Thursday, Saturday class. If you're in my Tuesday, Wednesday class, it's just right there as the supplemental materials for the study guide post. But it's just a quick 3-minute video that shows within Exemplify how you access it, which is just to click on this exam controls and then click on view attachment. So this video, we're just going to focus on outside of that, what do you need to focus on in order to prepare for the final exam? So outside of that diseases chart. And I am going to make my video smaller so I can see my screen. Okay. So if y'all have any questions, you can either unmute or you can type them into the chat. So starting with chapter 12, most of the final exam is chapters 19 through 26. But there was some sections in chapter 12 and actually 11 too, of you still need to know the characteristics of the organisms that are going to be all of the pathogens for these different diseases that we're going to talk about. And I focused on and put 12 on here just because of the fact that a lot of students seem to get these confused. So just to reiterate, fungi are eukaryotic, obviously. We're talking about survey of eukaryotes here. And that includes the yeast. So things like Candida albicans is one of the species that you need to remember that it is fungi. I do want to just point out in the charts that you're going to have on the test, it tells you what type of organism it is here in, gosh, I'm trying to get the square to work, here in the column that says type. So the information is there for you. You just have to slow down and make sure that you're reading it. So for example, I was just talking about Candida albicans. It tells you right here that it's a fungus and it's yeast. So that's just kind of one note, I guess. And that's why I have that listed on here on the study guide. And then the second part here, the know the arthropod vectors. This information really is also on that chart also, because these are going to be in the route of transmission column for the specific diseases that are caused by arthropod vectors. So for example here, chikungunya, it says chikungunya virus, and then if you go to the fourth column over, it says it is route of transmission is by an Aedes mosquito. So they pretty much tell you what the vector is. So again, that information is going to be there. You just have to slow down, take your time, pull up the chart, look through it in order to answer the questions. All right, for chapter 19, a lot of the information from this chapter is going to overlap with your 16 and 17 chapters because of the fact that that's all about your innate immunity and your adaptive immunity. And so a lot of that's going to kind of be repeated. You definitely need to know that what antibodies are, which are produced by the B cells in response to foreign antigens. Antigens are the proteins on the surface of the pathogen that are recognized by the antibody. An antihistamine is going to prevent inflammation. Histamine is the chemical that causes inflammation to occur. And then desensitization, I think we talked about that a little bit, but desensitization is injection of antigen into the individual, which desensitizes their immune system to it. So your immune system says, well, if this is constantly here, maybe it's not non-self. Maybe it's not something that foreign that needs to be destroyed. And so your immune system will say, I guess maybe this wasn't a big deal. Maybe I don't need to be freaking out about it. So desensitization is injection of the antigen in order to condition your body to not recognize it as something that's foreign, but to recognize it as self that doesn't need to be destroyed. Anaphylaxis, the biggest thing is knowing that that is mediated by the IgE antibodies. That's part of know the 5 classes of antibodies and their main function. So that's the IgE one, which that information you can find, what did I say, 19, in your, whoops, for some reason it didn't pull it up, in your chapter 19 need to know document. So this is chapters 19 through 21 need to know. And this has the 4 types of hypersensitivity, which you're also going to need to know these. The main thing with these is knowing examples of which is what. Biggest thing for this one, and I'll just tell you, most of the questions we're going to talk about are going to be either the type 1 or type 2, because they're going to be asking about anaphylaxis, which you need to know is type 1 caused by or mediated by the IgE antibody of class of antibodies. And then the type 2 is largely going to be the blood typing, mismatched blood transfusion. So that one, there is, I think, 1 or 2 questions on that. So you need to remember what antibodies are produced by which blood type, and so on and so forth. There is the definition of desensitization in here as well. So this is a lot of the information that you need to review is in this chapters 19 and 21 need to know document. I even have a little diagram that shows it. And then it has the section on the human blood typing that you need to review. And then also has the chart that tells you what's produced by which one. In that Kahoot for chapter 19, I had at least one example. I think there was one in the clicker and one in the Kahoot. That is a practice saying if a person's this blood type, which type can they receive as a transfusion, or what type of antibodies are they going to produce? So questions like that. So it didn't dawn on me that it's not in here. The classes of the antibodies, if you don't remember that, is from chapter 17. So if you don't remember what the different classes of antibodies are, so the IgG, the IgE, the IgD, all those, you might want to go back to chapter 17, need to know document to review those. Okay, so then that's that one. So that's the main things you need to review for chapter 19. For chapter 20, largely chapter 20 is what I was mentioning earlier, knowing that antibiotics are largely only effective against bacteria. Which of course are also referred to as prokaryotes, so you might see either one of those. And then, like I was mentioning earlier, if it's asking about a specific disease, paying attention to the organisms that are listed as to what type they are. So for example, prokaryotes replicate by binary fission. I'm going to change this color here if I can get it to work. I don't know if it'll do it. I want them color coded so that it makes more sense. There. And this was our Kahoot question that we had also. So for example, organisms that replicate by mitosis are going to be the eukaryotic organisms. So for our microbiology purposes, these are going to include the yeast or fungi. I should put, why did it stop typing? What happened here? Silly thing. Okay. Fungi, which includes the yeast, or protists, that includes our protozoas like amoeba, things like that. So I color coded those because those are one of the main things you need to focus on. So eukaryotes are going to replicate by mitosis. So largely the antibiotics are going to target those things that only occur or are present in the prokaryotes. And you don't need to memorize these different, these different names of these drugs, but you do need to be familiar with, this is on the chapter 20 need to know document, the different targets that they target are specific to prokaryotes. So they're going to hurt the bacteria that have infected us, but they're not going to hurt our cells. That's why it's more challenging to treat the protists and the fungi, because they don't have these cell differences, and drugs that hurt their cells are also going to hurt our cells. So biggest ones with that are the cell wall, the presence of the cell wall, because we don't have a cell wall. So that is something that a drug can target and hurt the bacteria, but not us. And then another one is the different structures of the ribosome. So the ribosome in prokaryotes is the 50S and 30S subunit that form the 70S ribosome, whereas in eukaryotes, it's the 60 and 40 subunits that form the 80S ribosome. So that whole chapter basically is kind of just understanding the targets mechanisms for the different antimicrobial agents, which is why I have this highlighted here, to understand the mechanism of action, the prokaryote versus eukaryote. So that's what I was just explaining. So then for the actual chapters that include the diseases, the introductory information that I have before I list the diseases is largely going to be what you need to focus on outside of that diseases chart, which again will be available on the test. So what I recommend, and this is actually what I did, I actually went through the whole final exam and took it as if I was a student and used the table to answer the question so that I could see how much information it provided for you. What I recommend is while you're going through the Kahoots and practicing with those, whether you make flashcards or whether you're just practicing on the Kahoot, what I highly recommend you do is look up the information in this chart that you think you need, and that way it will model how it's going to be when you actually take the final exam and you're looking up the answers to the questions. And that will let you know, was all the information on this chart that I needed, or was there some other things that are not included in the chart that I needed to know also? And that'll kind of give you a clue as to what you need to look up in your need to know charts, the PDFs. And those are things that you're going to need to memorize for the test. So, you know, knowing the terms that are associated with the different organ systems, so the conjunctiva, the epidermis, keratin, dermis, sebum, lysozyme, those are all things that are a part of the integumentary system. And then knowing the normal microbiota for these, if I have it listed on there, then that's something that you should probably memorize, because you're likely to get a question from that, especially if I have it in a Kahoot. And then you just get to the specific diseases that are listed, and those are in your chart that you will be able to use. So is there any questions about that? For 22, the nervous system. So you need to know the difference between the meninges and the actual brain tissue, which is the meningitis is an infection of the meninges, the connective tissue, whereas encephalitis is an infection of the brain. One of the, let me see, I have notes somewhere here. One of the, or there's two major topics that are not on your diseases chart. And I think I mentioned this to everyone on Thursday, but I'm recording this for my Tuesday, Wednesday class also, so they need to hear it. Where did I write it? It's on the back of a test. Hang on one second, let me find it. Oh, here it is. Is the causes of meningitis. There's too many to include it in the diseases chart, so that's not in the diseases chart. So where you need to find that is in the chapter 22 to 23 need to know document. That's where you have the infections of the nervous system. And that is all of these listed here. So you need to know the major causes that are bacterial, which include Haemophilus influenzae, Streptococcus pneumoniae, and Neisseria meningitidis. And then also the fact that there's viral meningitis that is caused by over 50 different types of viruses, but the most common are the echovirus, poliovirus, and the Coxsackie virus. So that's one thing that's not on your diseases chart that you're going to need to know, is those specific species and that information about the viruses. And then the other piece, and I think I mentioned this in the other little short video also, but I'm just going to reiterate it again here. While I'm thinking about it, because it's in a different chapter, but while I'm thinking about it, I don't want to pull up the clicker. I think it's the chapter 25 clicker PowerPoint review. The different types of hepatitis A, B, and C, and the route of transmission of those different types of hepatitis. Those are also not in your diseases chart. So meningitis, encephalitis, and then hepatitis. I think there is some of the encephalitis in the chart, just not meningitis. All right, and then chapter 23, normal microbiota of the nervous system. I actually don't think there is any normal microbiota of the nervous system, so I think I just copied this through the chapters. Diseases of the nervous system. Oh, you know what? I did copy it and I forgot to change it. This should say cardiovascular and lymphatic systems. So that, if you go to your chapter 23 section of the 22-23 need to know document. So there's really no need to memorize these charts that are in the need to know documents, because most of the information you need, except for meningitis and hepatitis, is in the charts for diseases study guide that you have available to you on the test, just to kind of reiterate that. So just kind of, you know, familiarize yourself again with the structures in the cardiovascular system and the lymphatic system. And then there's really not a whole bunch of information that you need to know outside of the diseases in this section. Puerperal sepsis is in your chart. You do need to know, what sepsis is. And it's basically a systemic infection, either by the toxin or the bacteria. Trying to look through here to make sure there's nothing else in here that you need to know. Okay, yeah, I think that's it for that chapter. And then respiratory system, there's a lot of structures in the respiratory system, and there is some things that you need to know about that. So in your 24 to 26, actually, let me go ahead and close this so that it's got less stuff open to worry about. In your respiratory system, you need to be familiar with the different components of the upper and lower respiratory tract. Know that the ciliary escalator is that mucus that is moved by the cilia in order to prevent microbes from reaching the lungs. This was one of our Kahoot questions too. The respiratory mucus contains IgA antibodies. So again, kind of just review back to 17 if you don't remember the classes of antibodies. This has the structures. So for the normal microbiota of the respiratory system, since it's basically essentially just a tube through our body that has access to the outside world when the air comes in, there are most of the bacteria that are the pathogenic microbes don't normally make us sick, but something occurs. Either they breach through the tissue in order to cause an infection, or we have a compromised immune system and our immune system's not capable of capturing it. The one thing I want to mention about the respiratory system is I believe there's a question that asks about symptoms. So you want to just think about what would be the symptoms in the respiratory system. So, you know, you have your sore throat, coughing, things like that. If you get fluid in your lungs, you have pneumonia, that type of stuff. It's not really in depth or specific. It's just kind of general stuff like that. There's no need to memorize all of these that are on this chart just because of the fact that they are on the diseases chart if they are organisms. But it doesn't hurt to just kind of review through it and make sure that you know what it's talking about. So here's the chart that actually has a list of some of the specific normal microbiota of the respiratory system. So those you should be familiar with because that's going to be something that's not on the diseases chart. It doesn't have the normal microbiota. I think the skin and the respiratory system are two of the big ones. Oh, and also the urinary system because it asks about the vagina, the normal microbiota.
Is that one on the need to know document, this chart?
For the urinary or for the skin?
For the skin and the urinary.
I believe so. I just closed the 21.
Sorry.
It's okay. I'm pretty sure it is on the skin one. If it's not, you can send me a message and ask about it, but I know for sure that we covered it in at least one Kahoot, the normal microbiota of the skin. So you want to look for that one too.
Right. Thank you.
Again, group A strep, we talked about that. Those are all in the diseases chart that you get to use. Let me scroll down to digestive system. So these are going to be mostly in the chart. I'm trying to think. I don't really think there's anything specific from the digestive system that you need to know outside of the diseases. So, oh, you do want to be familiar with the structures in the organ system and the order of them. I can't remember whether it's the respiratory system or the gastrointestinal tract, but one of those, it asks you to list them in the correct order from your head, from either where the food or water or food or air comes in down through the body. So you should know the order of these. So it's the mouth and then the pharynx, then the esophagus, then the stomach, then the small intestine, then the large intestine. Same thing for the respiratory tract. You have your nose, the pharynx, the larynx, the bronchi, whatever you want to say, down to the lungs. So this one has on this chart the normal microbiota of the digestive system also. So lactobacilli, enterococci, lactobacilli in your intestines also. I don't specifically ask about in the colon, so there's no need to memorize all of these, just kind of those general ones, which you'll find that lactobacilli is also the most common one in the vagina as well for the reproductive system and urinary tract. So again, these charts you don't need to focus on too much because of the fact that those are in the diseases chart. This does have the hepatitis one in here. Oh, I forgot that I had that in there. So you can refer to this, like I mentioned on the other video. For the hepatitis, you need to focus on the type of hepatitis and the route of transmission, because these are not on your chart for diseases study guide that you're going to be able to use. And then, so this information here, the most common nosocomial infection for UTIs is Escherichia coli. You do need to know that. That's not in your diseases chart. I think it might be in there. I don't know. Now that I mentioned. Structures. So this one has both listed, that the urethra supports lactobacillus and staphylococcus, but you do need to know that lactobacillus is the main, most common, most abundant normal microbiota in the urinary system. Which is listed down here under the vagina. And then this is largely the different diseases. I do want to mention, well, it's on the chart, so it's, I added a few. Those are listed in the announcement where I posted the first short little initial video. Those are some that weren't on the original chart for diseases study guide that I shared with everybody. So those you would just want to make sure that you're familiar with those as well if you're looking at the document, because they are contained in this version that is going to be included with the test. Normal microbiota. And I have a lot of the stuff that I was just talking about listed actually on the study guide here. So yeah, that's basically it for that one. Does anybody have any questions? Close this one. A big thing with the STIs and the reproductive and urinary system, knowing these is going to be really paying attention to which ones are protists, which ones are fungi, for example, which ones are viral, which ones are bacterial, because there is a lot of information in that section. So this is down here in the urinary and reproductive systems section. And it's the information's here, you just have to pay attention, like I was talking about before. So for example, trichomoniasis is caused by Trichomonas vaginalis, which is a protist. The subgroup of that is the unicellular protozoa. So that one is not going to respond well to most antibiotics because it's not a bacteria, it's not a prokaryote. Viruses are largely not treatable. We know we have some vaccines. Oh, that's another piece of information. So in general, any viral infection, whether it's in the respiratory system or the urinary system, wherever it is, the most effective way to treat or prevent viral infections is through vaccination, because of the fact that we don't have very good antiviral agents for most diseases. That's not true. We talked about hepatitis C is kind of one example that is an exception, but best way to treat any viral infection is going to be through vaccination. And so I think that's about it for like the study guide review. So does anybody have any questions about those? I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording. So like I said, anybody, if you have questions, send me those. I'm sharing this with my Tuesday, Wednesday class, so I'm saying that as if they're not in here listening right now. So if you have any questions as you're studying, just shoot me out an email and I'll be happy to help you answer it.